Allie, first of all, have we heard anything from Hillary Clinton's camp about that? And what more did we hear from the former president in that statement that was just released a short time ago?
Well, they're right. We will end up seeing the video. That's supposed to come. Democrats are hoping for in the next 24 hours. But in the meantime, we're hearing that readout from Mace. And then, yes, I have heard from the Clinton camp, a spokesperson for Clinton telling me in quite colorful language that Nancy Mace is full of blank. I won't use that language around noon today. He then goes on to explain, was Clinton appalled that Congresswoman Mace wouldn't let her answer a question about her work as a senator after the murder of 3,000 Americans on 9/11? Absolutely. It's an interesting explanation. It's partly why it's going to be good for us to have the deposition video, because the question Mace was asked was about Clinton responding when Republicans asked her about seeing her husband, Bill Clinton, in some of the photos that have been released by DOJ and the Epstein estate. That's the question that Mace seemed to be responding to. But now we're seeing in this explanation from a Clinton spokesperson that it was around an exchange on 9/11. And so I'm just interested to see the context that we're hearing this in and what actually happened, because all of us are going to be able to see for ourselves. And frankly, Chris, the same is going to be true for Bill Clinton as well. His deposition is happening privately, but will later be released. And I think in his statement, he makes the point that Hillary Clinton should not have been called in. I think many of us and Democrats on the committee certainly were questioning what insight Hillary Clinton might have, given the way that she has said she doesn't have a relationship with Epstein and wasn't aware, for example, of funding that was being done or conversations around funding for the Clinton Global Initiative that might have been had with Epstein or Maxwell. Clinton was a U.S. senator at the time and not part of doing that kind of business. But the other thing that Bill Clinton says in his deposition is that he warns members there are things that he might not recall more than 2 decades after the fact. He says he's going to try to stick to what he remembers, but that what he does remember clearly, and you read this in your opening remarks too, he doesn't remember seeing anything that reeked of the sex trafficking and gross crimes that Epstein himself committed, or else Clinton says he would have turned Epstein in himself.
All right, Joyce, when compared to Hillary Clinton, there is a lot more Bill Clinton can be asked about. So what do you think are the legitimate questions that he might be facing today?
You know, this is obviously congressional oversight that has a political twinge, as opposed to how I might have conducted an investigation into Epstein as a prosecutor. But I think the questions are similar. It's who, what, when, where, why, and how. This is a fact-finding inquiry, an effort to get to the bottom of what Jeffrey Epstein was doing and how he got away with it for so long. And there's certainly some suggestion in the Epstein files that Bill Clinton might be able to shed light on some of those questions. So I think that they're fair game. I think he, and he has said as much, is obligated to respond under oath. The shame, as Allie's and your comments point out, is that it's not being done publicly so we can all see it and understand for ourselves what's going on. But this is at bottom an inquiry into getting justice for survivors, and that comes through the truth regardless of who is summoned upon to testify. You know, if Bill Clinton can testify, others who show up in the files should testify too, including the current president and his wife.
So, Matt, we have famously seen Bill Clinton under oath before in a deposition back in 1998, and that was when he was asked about his relationship with Monica Lewinsky. Here's that.
The statement that there was no sex of any kind, in any manner, shape, or form with President Clinton was an utterly false statement. Is that correct?
It depends upon what the meaning of the word is. Yes. If is means is and never has been, that is not that's one thing. If it means there is none, that was a completely true statement.
At the time, beyond the late night talk show hosts who had a field day with that, so did a lot of lawyers and the American public. But I'm wondering, when you look at that compared to what he said in his opening statement just a short time ago, you'll often hear me say that I don't recall. That might be unsatisfying, but I'm not going to say something I'm not sure of. This was all a long time ago. What are the stakes here for Bill Clinton?
Well, they're a whole lot lower than they were in that testimony. When he was president, he was fighting for his political survival, and And look, that was probably the lowest point of his presidency. I think he would certainly stipulate to that. And he was parsing it in an incredibly legalistic and lawyerly way. I don't think you're going to see anything like that today. I think he's going to testify fully and truthfully, but this was, up to 20 years ago, this contact that he had with Epstein. So he'll probably do his best, but I don't remember details of things happening 20 years ago, and I'm younger than Bill Clinton is. So it probably is true that he's going to have a hard time recalling the kinds of details the committee is looking for. But let me just say that all of this inquiry and all of this kind of pearl clutching that some of the Republicans are doing around Bill Clinton is a little hollow, given the fact that, as you noted, and as Joyce noted, the president of the United States, the sitting president, is in the Epstein files more than 5,000 times and is credibly accused of terrible things. And this committee is not looking at any of them.
So, Congressman, we did hear from virtually every Democratic member here today, and exactly to Matt's point, that today's deposition in their mind sets a precedent. Here's what they said.
We are now asking and demanding that President Trump officially come in and testify in front of the Oversight Committee.
Let's be real. We're talking to the wrong president today. President Trump is the one who has not released 2.5 million files.
This investigation will not be complete until we bring President Trump in to answer questions under oath.
Donald Trump needs to come before this committee, and we will not stop fighting until we get the truth and there's accountability and justice for the survivors.
Realistically, Congressman, where do you put the likelihood of Trump ever testifying about Jeffrey Epstein?
I think it's highly unlikely that he would testify. He'll fight it all the way as a sitting president, even though I think Democrats are correct that he certainly should be called to testify based on his longstanding relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. That said, I can just see the president fighting this. Now, if the House flips control, which is many consider likely after the elections, I suspect there'll be renewed efforts to force the current president, Donald Trump, to testify. But you can be assured that he will use every legal avenue at his disposal to decline that invitation. So I wouldn't bet on Donald Trump testifying anytime during his presidency.
Even if he doesn't testify, Joyce, there is still a lot of material out there from the Epstein files, in particular some things that people want to see from DOJ that may have involved a very young teenage girl. What are the chances that very specific things that Democrats and frankly even some Republicans are calling for might get released? Where does all that stand?
Well, there was reporting last night, Chris, that some of the Republicans in the Senate had picked up this cry for the full release of the Epstein files by the Justice Department that Congress called for it when it passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act. How serious they are remains to be seen, but it's clear that public pressure on this issue is sustained. It's not going anywhere, and it does seem to be animating the response by Republicans in Congress at this point. You know, the reality is that this will go as far as Congress pushes it. It's their law. They're the ones who are entitled to go to the White House and the Justice Department and demand the release of files that it's increasingly clear are missing. This is not a Justice Department that's been forthcoming with the courts. There's no reason that they should any longer have this presumption of legitimacy that the courts have typically applied to the Justice Department, assuming that they're doing their jobs in the right way. It's clear documents are missing. It's up to Congress to demand that they be provided.
Matt, the New York Times reports that Hillary Clinton was irate after Congresswoman Lauren Boebert released a photo from her deposition. And here's Boebert being asked about what you're seeing on your screen right now.
Were you reprimanded by Chairman Comer for that?
No, there was no reprimanding. There was no rules violated with a photo.
No rules violated?
Yeah, okay. We're good.
What stood out to you, Congresswoman, from the deposition so far?
Well, I mean, I really admired her blue suit, so I wanted to capture that for everyone.
Anything else that she said?
Why did you send the picture?
Why not?
Just to be clear, so people understand, the agreement very clearly that was made to have the Secretary Clinton testify was that there would not be anything like this released, and certainly not during her testimony, even though she wanted it all to be public. But do you think that makes Bill Clinton reevaluate anything today?
Probably not. I think the negotiations are over. He's going to go testify. There's not much he can do about the fact that there are people like Lauren Boebert, who is a social media influencer, posing as a member of Congress in that hearing. I mean, look, of course it was a violation of the rules. Everyone knows that. And of course, the chairman, Comer, didn't do anything to reprimand her, because that's how MAGA Republicans operate. They just violate the rules and pretend that they didn't. Look, I don't think it was a huge deal that a photo was released, but I think it's important to emphasize and to keep emphasizing that it isn't the Clintons that wanted this to be done behind closed doors. It is the Republicans. And one of the reasons for that is the last time that Hillary Clinton, for example, testified before the Republicans, she just batted them around like a cat with a ball of yarn for 11 hours. This was after Benghazi, and she got the best of them, and they know it. Bill Clinton is pretty quick on his feet still, and I think he's going to do pretty well also. So I think the Republicans were aware that making this public might not go well for them, and it puts a further spotlight on the fact that they are not asking these questions of Donald Trump, who is vastly deeper and vastly more involved with Epstein than either of the Clintons.